Video and photo backlogs can leave you overwhelmed, exhausted, and burnt out. We've been there, and our fears of outsourcing stopped us in the past. Can you find an editor as invested in your brand as you are? Will other photographers and filmmakers we network with look down on us for not editing everything on our own? That fear of outsourcing can be detrimental to your career. That's why we love our partnership with Weditor. Their attention to details with not only our work, but also their care for their clients through all steps of the outsourcing process lets us fully step back from editing and focus on what we love, knowing our work is receiving the attention it needs. More than just editing, Weditor is passionate about demystifying the outsourcing market. Follow Weditor on Instagram at we_r_Weditor for free educational tips, tools, and resources to guide you through the insanity of today's editing market. For an even deeper dive, follow Weditor's blog at weditor.com/outsourcing.
Welcome to the We Got You podcast, a network curated for wedding photographers and filmmakers that dives deep into the strategies and tactics to transitioning a side hustle in the wedding industry into a full-time, thriving career. We're your hosts, luxury wedding filmmaker Emma K. Films and luxury destination wedding photographer Hannah Brook Photography. It wasn't too long ago that we picked up our cameras for the first time, having absolutely no idea where it would lead us. Years later, we're traveling the globe for beautiful destination weddings, built our dream lifestyles, and run multi-six-figure careers. It didn't happen overnight and it wasn't easy, but it is attainable and so worth it. And we're ready to teach you our strategies. Covering a variety of topics from both our first-hand experiences and reputable guest speakers' insights crucial for business growth, we're exploring the art of marketing within your niche, discussing effective ways to attract and retain clients, leverage social media, and build a strong online presence, and so much more. We're not shying away from talking through the challenges of the wedding industry and offering realistic solutions to navigate them successfully. We emphasize the importance of networking, establishing meaningful relationships with clients, and continuously honing one's craft to stand out in a competitive market. This is the We Got You podcast.
Hello. Welcome to another episode on the We Got You podcast. This week, we're seriously so excited to chat about something that we feel like we've had a lot of people ask about in the Facebook group, something that, we've had a lot of people share that they struggle with or would love to know more about, which is the difference of being able to really, truly, authentically document your couple's love stories versus just like posing your couples. When we let go of the posing, we really get to connect with our couples. We get to let them be vulnerable, have them give them a space to be themselves and really make those films and photos who they are and reflect their story versus just being posed into what we want them to be. So when thinking about this topic and everything, we really could not think of anyone better to have on this episode and are truly so honored to get to chat with the incredibly talented photographer and educator, Marcella Laine. Thank you so much for being on here today. How are you doing?
Hi, I'm so good. I'm so happy to be here.
Thank you so much for making time to come jump on and chat all about this with our listeners and everyone. But before we kind of dive into the topic and everything for today's episode, we'd really love for you to just share about who you are. For anyone listening who doesn't know you or follow you yet, we'd love to have you just kind of walk us through your journey, kind of how you got into photography, education, and really what brought you to where you are today.
Awesome. Yeah, I would love to. So I studied photography in college. I was introduced to all kinds of creative things by my first boyfriend, who I was we have a great relationship now. But he was a photographer and he was actually super inspiring. He won the Canon in the Parks contest when he was just a little kid and got a 5D Mark II when he was really young. And so in college, we would always play with that. And he actually ended up giving me that camera when we were seniors in college, and it became my lifeline very quickly. And so photography kind of evolved for me throughout college in a really playful way. I studied abroad when I was a junior, and that was when I really started to see the impact that travel had on my creativity and how inspired I was by it, and how having the opportunity to take photos all the time because I was constantly stimulated really impacted my skill as a creative. And so it was kind of the blending of travel and creativity and new experiences that inspired me to lean more into it. And so I went to school for graphic design, which is great because it still applies today as a entrepreneurial creative. But right out of college, I was working in graphic design and I was enjoying it, but I wasn't super set on it at all. And then I had an opportunity to go abroad with an organization called Harvest Craft that I very quickly became their creative director in terms of photography and video and all of their web design and stuff. And I had to leave my position at the full-time corporate job I was working at Amazon to be able to do that. And so I went to Cambodia with them for a month and did a project with them on sustainable agriculture and creating regenerative farming in these communities. And so that was the big factor that made me go full time. And so I did that in November of 2016. And then I did a few more trips with them to Haiti and kind of all over. And that was when I was full-time photographer. And I just kind of never went back to corporate world or all of those, my graphic design background, really. And so that was when I took the big shift. And people always ask me, especially as an educator, they're like, when did you know when it was right to go full time? Or when were you ready to take that step? And I'm always just like, I was just so lucky to be young and dumb. And I feel like that, not afraid, right? Just like that fear of stability when you're older becomes really, like, it tends to hold you back. So because I was 23 and like fresh out of college and wasn't used to a stable income, I just went for it and it paid off so great, obviously. So from there, my career really just I always say, like, I never really felt like I blew up or had a moment as like a really intense transition. It was really just like one foot in front of the other, slowly building my business. Something else I always say is like, you will get so much more work and opportunities by leaving like a positive impact on people. So I feel like the first like 3 years of my business, it was working a ton of jobs. It was working a ton of weddings and leaving an impact on those people that they really wanted to hire me for their engagements or their destination or wedding or whatever, as far as like guests or wedding party people. And so that was like my first few years in my business. I was shooting just like a ton of weddings. I didn't really niche out at all until about like 2020 is when my career really shifted to specifically in the outdoors. So that was obviously the pandemic was happening and all of my destination work was canceled. All of my huge weddings were canceled and we were all kind of left being really unsure what we were going to end up doing. And for me, what evolved out of that was tons of really small things in Washington. So I like explored my home state in a way I hadn't ever done before. And I had always been outdoorsy and implemented that into my work in some ways. But that was the year where it really became a core part of my business. And then from there, I had hosted a few small workshops, or I had hosted one workshop before that in Joshua Tree. But 2022 was my first Home in the Mountains workshop, which is now a really destination outdoors based photography workshop I have for kind of more advanced full-time photographers. And that has evolved in the last few years. So now I'm in a really fun, exciting part of my business that is partially, I would say it's like more and more every year it becomes, 50% client work, 50% education, or, kind of that ebbs and flows a little bit. And I mean, as are most things in our business, like everything is very fluid. As soon as I start to put a label on something, it's like, it's shaken up in a new way. But that's kind of where I'm at now. And it's fun to be able to like re-fall in love with what I'm doing constantly. The education element, particularly in-person experiences, I feel really confident in knowing that I provide a really intentional, expansive experience. And so that has fueled me in my client work in a really inspiring and meaningful way as well. So I feel really excited about where I'm at and so happy to be here with you guys chatting about it. But yeah, that's kind of my whole journey to where I am now.
I love hearing just honestly, your entire journey going from someone who going through college was young, like was kind of like fresh in the corporate world and getting out of that and just going full time. I think it's cool that you touched on just like your ability to pivot, like when COVID was happening and it's like you went from someone who was completely documenting weddings to being like, hey, like I'm now exploring my home state and really getting into elopements and like seeing what's around here. And like you had to pivot in that moment to like realize like, okay, like this isn't working at the moment because of obviously like uncontrollable circumstances, but like what can I do now to continue to thrive? And even moving forward, kind of touching on just your ability of pivoting and the ebbs and flows of now, like, hey, yeah, some years, like I'm doing education mostly. Some years I'm doing weddings mostly. It's like this ebb and flow, 50-50. I think it's really cool to hear that, because I think a lot of us think that there's, like this one road to success and you have to do it a certain way. And you have to, as you're filming weddings more, like, or as you're working on education more, you're going to do weddings less. And then that's just it. But I think the cool reality of it is it doesn't have to be that way, right? Like there are going to be some years where you're going to give more to education. And maybe there are some years where you're like, you know what? I just want to take this year and focus on weddings, maybe host one workshop, like just relax and kind of take it through different avenues. And I think it's just really cool seeing how you've pivoted in your business to really find a lifestyle that fits exactly what you're looking for. And it does change, and that's okay.
Absolutely. I feel like one of my biggest things I talk to people about in mentorships, in-person experience, whatever, is I actually think niching is like, for some people, I think a lot of my success is from not niching too early or too soon, or, thinking that needed to be a part of my identity. Like a lot of people who want to break into the destination market don't realize that it's a lot easier to do so if you are shooting larger scale events. And so if you are solely niching out to elopements really early, but you want to also implement destination or travel work into your job, I really don't think like people are able to make that connection. So many of my destination clients are hosting these really large luxury events, and that's why they are willing to invest in their dream photographer as well. Whereas elopements oftentimes have a much smaller budget just by nature. And so there's a lot less of the people who are willing to bring a person across the world to then work for their event. So that's always one of the like most tangible links. I'm like, if you want to shoot more travel work or destination work, widening the expanse of like the type of events you're open to shooting is definitely like a really easy way to start to get into that market.
I love hearing that. So like kind of digging into just like your why as a photographer. Obviously, like as creatives, we always have like that why that really drives us. What would you say, what is your why as a photographer, and how do you feel like that influences, the way that you get to photograph your couples?
That has always, hearing you ask me, it's always been such an interesting thing. I mean, I guess fluidity is like the theme of this conversation, but it's something that has changed for me throughout the years. There's so many things. So obviously creativity is what drives me, but as well as creative entrepreneurship. Like I love running a business. And I mean, I think you guys can really agree based on just the level of professionalism you both are at. I can like just see that it comes out of you. But I am so driven by, building something and seeing it grow. And that's definitely like the more tangible part of my brain that is like, I do well, working for myself. I'm a hard worker. I'm driven, particularly when I'm doing something that I'm passionate about. And so I would say first and foremost, my why is like my personal happiness, right? Like I am happy doing this. And that is the greatest reward that we could ever have in life, right? Talking about the more outer circle things, like I love being outside. I love spending my work days in the outdoors, and I love sharing that with people who have a similar passion and interest for that. Like my biggest inspiration is when I am with people who are similarly just absolutely blown away by what's happening in front of them. And it's having that really high energy, like I reflect back the energy that I'm given. And so when I am sharing that with people who similarly are passionate and stoked and like so thrilled, I think that's why I really thrive at the in-person experiences and workshops, because I'm with a crew of people who are like also losing their mind over what they're seeing. I love the experiences I've had. Like, there's nothing cooler than watching ibex like run down a cliff in Switzerland as your clients are saying their vows, and that they feel so dropped into their bodies and themselves in that moment that I similarly like get to capture that and repeat it back to them. I would say like the ability to translate things that other people can't, that's like why we're hired as creatives, right? So someone is so drawn to your work because they want to see something that they really cherish, their connection with a person, or maybe even, their connection to themselves, or whatever it may be that they're hiring you to capture, and they want to see it through your eyes. I think that is just the biggest honor and most beautiful concept that I've ever even heard. So the fact that I get to do that, it definitely absolutely drives me. Yeah, I would say like just simply, being outdoors, these shared experiences with other people, meeting new people, of course, like my entire 20s, I just turned 30 last year. So I'm in a, transitional phase, but my entire 20s was driven by constantly meeting new people. I shoot a lot of people, and I always was really fascinated by how I got to go to work and I was meeting people who had such different backgrounds and experiences. There was no consistency there or cohesion. Like it was just absolutely all over the place. And some of my clients have evolved into just my absolute best friends. And some of my, some people have impacted me in other ways that are, really positive as well. Even if it's not like a best friendship, it's like the impact of being around that expansive energy, people who are really chasing their dreams, things like that. So like just the access to get to meet all types of people from all walks of life and see that impact on me personally, it's just such a cool thing that my career can be this personable self-growth journey as well as like a business endeavor.
Oh my gosh. Okay. I love this because I feel like so many people, when they talk about their why, like feel like they have to share about the community, like, oh, like my why is for the couples, or my why is XYZ, or something a lot more generic. Whereas when you started off talking about your why, it was very much like for your happiness, kind of creating that lifestyle, what joy you get from it and how you can reflect that into your couples, like sharing that joy with your couples, sharing that happiness with your couples. And it really speaks to just how personal our businesses are. Like our businesses are not just, oh, it's to take photos or, to make people happy in photos. Like it is so personal where it really is down to our own cores of like, this is the lifestyle I want. This is what I want to be doing. This is what like drives me and fuels me. And like, I want to reflect that onto my couples. So I don't know. I just think that's such a beautiful way of putting it that I feel like so many people, when trying to figure out what their whys are, get very stuck on like, what am I doing for the community or, for clients or whatnot, versus really truly like thinking about, what in themselves is really fueling them to do photography. And just hearing about that obviously reflects in your work with how your couples, look and feel. And you can just tell that they just absolutely are so comfortable in your photos and in your work and even around you because they are feeling that like reflection of your why.
Oh, I love that. Thank you. Yeah, I feel like also, when I was younger, maybe I would be like, oh, I'm really attached to the concept of people's connection, people's relationships. But also as I've grown, like I'm single and 30. I've had 2 long-term breakups who taught me a lot of really beautiful lessons. I have great relationships with both those people, but I am not just enamored with the concept of marriage. Like I feel a lot of people that is maybe their driving why. And while I am really, really inspired and consumed with relationships, I don't personally have this like some amazing photographer, videographer out of Virginia came to our last workshop. And it was so fascinating to hear her talk about her experience. This last summer, she had her wedding and she's been full-time for years and years. And she was like, I have an entirely new perspective on how I'm creating for my couples being on the other end. And I think we hear that a lot. And what's interesting for me is I'm like, that has transformed her business in this last year in such huge, beautiful ways. And then to be like, I actually feel not the opposite. It's not that I'm uninspired, but it's like I'm seeking that meaning in other spaces. And like, I feel like that's allowed for me to put a lot more of myself into my work. And it's just been a really interesting evolution.
Does your current client delivery system feel unexciting, limiting, and boring? Maybe you're still using good old Google Drive or Dropbox to deliver your clients' wedding films. If the answer to these is yes, it's time to level up your video delivery experience with VidFlow. VidFlow is a pay-per-use online platform that allows you to deliver fully branded websites for each of your clients. While being incredibly affordable, VidFlow is accessible on mobile, desktop, and smart TVs with included long-term hosting so that your clients can truly enjoy the entire experience when receiving their wedding films. When I first found VidFlow, it was such an easy switch that truly benefited my business substantially. With so many incredible features and options for customization and personalization, VidFlow continues to wow my clients time and time again. You can find VidFlow on Instagram or visit their website at vidflow.co. Use our code WGY20 for 20% off a yearly premium membership and level up your client experience today with VidFlow.
We would love to really have you walk us through What does it look like when you're like connecting with your couples or having them really get comfortable and feel vulnerable in front of a camera before and during a wedding day? Like, especially when thinking of like documenting authentically instead of just having like pose shots or having them do specific things on a wedding day. How do you really get them into that headspace of feeling comfortable enough to really truly be authentically documented?
I'm going to start with like where I'm at now and then kind of walk backwards, because I feel like where I'm at now is one of those things where people might feel disconnected from like, well, I don't get that opportunity, So I want to like make sure that I then like scale it back to like how I got to this point. But now a lot of what my work looks like, which is amazing, is since it's primarily destination work, I am working in a space where I am staying on site with my couples. I'm spending 3 days with them, and I am able to just do my best work, which is work super fluidly. I capture things that I see happening organically. I'm able to establish rituals with the friends and people I'm making. So everyone is now like, by the wedding night, I am never the photographer. I am like their friend Marcy. And so, of course, that is allowing me to capture things in a new way. But that being said, that is attached to destination work, right? It's attached to the intimacy of me literally staying in a tower on site and then like peeking out. One of my favorite, most meaningful jobs of all time was this super extensive wedding. We did their elopement in Brooklyn, and I stayed with them in their home. And then we all flew to Italy together, and we did truffle hunting on one day, and then we did spa and welcome dinner, winery on the next day. And then we did, by their wedding day, me and the bride, Annalisa, had this entire ritual. We met in the morning for sunrise and espresso, and we meditated together, and we talked about the days and stuff. So I was having such an intimate experience that then on the wedding morning, when I like poked my head out and saw her like scurrying up the cobblestone to meet me, I was like, obviously just snapping what was happening, but also like finding meaning in my work. I was like, this is a shared experience I'm having with her. This is something that I cherish now as well. And so of course these photos are going to have such beautiful, like they're going to mean something to me too, right? So of course, when I'm putting a bit of myself into my work, it's always there. That being said, this has not always been my life. I have not always been being flown to Italy and having the ability to shoot these really impactful things. For me, one time, one of my clients told me, this has always stuck with me. And it was just like an engagement shoot in Seattle, but it was one of the partners was a guy. And he said, you just are so disarming. Like when I'm in your presence, I feel like I'm able to be myself. And I've always kept that thought of, disarming was a word I hadn't really ever applied to myself. But now when I'm able to reflect on like what makes people able to feel comfortable in front of me, I realize it is that concept of disarming, like very much making people feel in a more tangible way. Like I feel like I make myself look kind of silly and funny. Like how I'm engaging is like really jokey, and I'm always making myself seem like a little bit like, less cool or less intimidated. I'm always projecting like this is like a really fun environment. And so that is like a really obvious, tangible thing. But so being disarming, I think, comes from just like sheerly being comfortable and confident in who I am. So again, it's kind of like that reflection of yourself into the work, but knowing that like my confidence in guiding them through this experience is going to be the number one thing that makes them able to open up. That being said, making sure people stay authentic and comfortable to who they are. I think that not having like too clearly defined I honestly don't do like an insane amount of prep work with my clients. So people are always like, oh, what do you do beforehand? And I'm like, yeah, of course I, have a relationship with them on social media and we take calls and stuff. But I think it's kind of a false narrative that you can really get to know someone beforehand if you're not spending a ton of time with them. So I think it's more the environment you're offering them when you're in person with them. And the biggest thing to me is one time I was doing a mentorship, and what came to my head, the guy was like, I just am never feeling like I'm creating the work that I want to create, right? It's like closing the gap. He wasn't closing the gap. And I was like, well, you're never going to close the gap if what you're trying to create is not from what's in front of you. It's from what you've seen before. You're never going to feel like you achieve that because you're simply never going to achieve that. Yes, of course, there's a difference between, inspiration. I'm all over Pinterest, but like it's going to a shoot and being able to release those expectations of what you're going to create and being inspired by what's in front of you. And I think for me, like when I closed the gap in like 2019 or 2020, I think it was that I released trying to recreate things I had seen and understanding, like being able to drop into my body and be really present and consume what was happening in front of me. Allows me also to shoot in the same location tons of times, right? Because I'm never like going into a space and thinking, okay, I need to go here and then I need to go here. I kind of approach it similarly to how I approach my couples, which is every single shoot is entirely different because every single person is entirely different. So not trying to like having the clearly defined understanding of using inspiration and feeling, inspired by something and not trying to like recreate that. If that does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely. Well, and I think it's crazy too, because even just everything that you've shared, it's insane how much of a photography business is mindset. It's like you said, like that disarming quality. It's like you have to walk in with that confidence of like, I belong here. I'm supposed to be here. This is where I need to be. And like, feel like you fit in. Like you can't walk in with imposter syndrome and be like terrified if somebody's going to call you out because you shouldn't be there, And then even just like, working with your couples that like, I'm supposed to be here and like that confidence. And then even with that gap, closing the gap, you have to have that mindset of, I'm not going to be able to recreate something I've seen. I have to go in with this to create like from what's in front of me, and how can I get motivated and inspired by what I'm seeing and use that to create something beautiful that hasn't been created yet. So as much as I feel like we get so almost like bogged down with that, like, what is the gear that we're shooting with, prices, XYZ, like logistical stuff, it is so much mindset that makes the difference and creates that experience, which completely changes your business.
Absolutely.
Yeah, okay. And I feel like how you interact too, like so much of it is like, what personality are you like exuding? Because like, yeah, if you're going to come on, like if you're just doing a couple, like an engagement session, right? You walk in, you're super intimidating, you're super cocky, right? You're going to make your clients feel very on edge. You're going to make them feel like, they're obviously nervous to be vulnerable with you. Then you walk in with this presence that's like really shy and really nervous, and like you're posing a lot because you like don't know what to do. And like they feed off that energy to then feel like, oh, well, I feel awkward and I feel nervous. And so it's like you have to go in with this level of confidence where, again, you don't want to be cocky and you don't want to be like intimidating. But you also don't want to be like super nervous and really, really shy. Like you want to just provide them this confidence that feels personable, and it feels like you're giving your clients the ability to feel vulnerable. And I feel like in those moments, that's when you're able to see your client's most authentic self, as opposed to like, oh, I need to continuously pose them. So I love that perspective.
No, absolutely. Like the next thing I was thinking in my head was like, it's your personality too, that's what makes this such a unique thing to be doing, is because like what will, like how you shoot is a direct reflection of like yourself. So if you're ever trying to shoot and, like there's so many people in our industry who have really defined, distinct styles, and that is a very obvious reflection of their personalities. And so like, obviously that's so cool how you can see people's self in their work, but it's also trying to like do the work of knowing yourself and how that's what you want to put into your work, right? So oftentimes, talking about how we can make people comfortable, that's pretty universal, right? But like when people come to my workshop because they want to shoot similar to me, or like shoot in the outdoors, there's like, you need to have that alignment with yourself before you can put on the hat of, like I don't shoot super editorial. I don't pose incredibly creative. My work is specifically like a reflection of what's organically happening in front of me and how I'm, guiding that and creating the experience and seeing the really intentional compositional shots. But like I don't have the ability to style my clients, and so what's interesting is like that is something that having that self-awareness and putting that into your brand is so key to attracting the clients who want to hire what you can offer them. So, one of my best friends, Cara Mia, is incredible at styling and editorial work. And I am simply inept at that. So if I got a client and they asked me, like, yes, of course, I guide them on what to wear, but I could never style them. Yet that is something Kara offers. And that's something that when she books those clients who are, that's what they're seeking. And that's amazing that she's so in alignment that they want her to give her that experience from start to end. Whereas when people are hiring me, they're hiring like a relationship forward experience.
I love that. And I feel like even what you touched on about like those that come to your workshops, like it really is like surrounding yourself by people that really do inspire you as well. Because again, if you're going to go, maybe you invest in some education and it's entirely different, right? It's like, maybe I'm like, hey, I am super editorial, but then I'm going to someone else's workshop that, is completely different. And it's not to say like, I think there's so much benefit from learning from people who don't shoot the same way as you. But I think especially when it comes to like, okay, like how can I pose my couples? How can I document like a more authentic wedding? Going into it as like, okay, I'm going to find creators that really inspire me, that film or photograph the way that I do. And then really just seeing the way that they interact with people. Because I think like for me, in styled shoots that I have been to, it is just so incredible just to see how other people interact, right? Like to see what are they doing with their couples? How are they talking to them? What kind of presence are they leading? Because you, of course, can have entirely different personalities than the person who's on the other side of the room as you. But with that being said, like you can learn a lot from them and they can learn a lot from you, and you can still interact with your couples in that same way where you're getting a more authentic side of them. So I think it's really cool just hearing kind of like from the educational perspective of like the importance of finding education that really aligns with what your style is. And like there's so much you can learn from other creators who are the same as you.
Absolutely. And it's funny, the more I do workshops, particularly like international things that are, larger scale investment, both financially and in time and energy, the more I'm like, oh, these are like my little siblings, like these are my little babies that are, and I'm, we become best friends immediately because I'm like, you had the drive to, travel to New Zealand solo. We are going to naturally get along, like there's this effortless type of, it's like doing what's it called? Like like sifting, it's like naturally you fall into these little categories of like, I am willing to do this huge thing by myself. And it's like, okay, so you have this self-confidence, you have this self-assuredness, you also believe in yourself, right? If you are going to invest as much in a workshop or an experience, you're going to know that like what you're doing is going to propel you forward. You're going to have that motivation, I guess, to know that. And so it's fun to see those like connections happening and how you're surrounding yourself with people in general is always, impacting you.
I love that. Marcy, it has been so cool to just get to chat with you. And like, I even feel that way. And I'm sure Hannah feels the same. Like even just speaking with you through the podcast, like you do feel like that disarming presence. And I think like having that be like something that you're known for is really cool when you're just able to be vulnerable and be open. And it's cool seeing your journey of how far you've come, how incredible your work is. Would love to know before we like officially close out the episode, would love to get your Instagram, which we will link in the show notes, but would love to have you say it for anyone who maybe is listening in the car right now. And then would love to hear a little bit more about your workshops and where people can kind of like reach out to you as an educator.
So my handle is Marcella Laine. My workshop is called Home in the Mountains. So it's super landscape destination work driven. We are going to have 2 more events happening this year. So you can definitely keep eyes out for those. But yeah, this was so fun. Thank you so much for having me. It was great to meet you guys.
Yeah, thank you again so much for taking your time, coming on, just sharing everything and really pouring your heart out. Like Emma said, it's incredible. Just like, I feel like everybody listening, all of our audience, like just getting to know you through this episode, like it's so evident, like just how incredible your business and work is already just from hearing you talk and everything. So if you are not following her yet, make sure that you jump onto her Instagram, give her a follow, check out her education. Again, thank you so much for being on here. And for you guys listening, we will see you guys next week on the We Got You podcast. Thanks for listening to another episode of the We Got You podcast. We would absolutely love it if you could take an extra minute to leave us a review and let us know what you think. DM us a screenshot of it and we'll send you a coffee on us. If you want access to an exclusive community, rad freebies, giveaways, and wedding referrals, then join our Facebook group today. Also, if you aren't already, subscribe to our YouTube channel and make sure that you're following along on Instagram at WeGotYou_podcast to stay up to date. We'll see you next week on the We Got You podcast.